So we'll go on to something which is considerably more mainstream for all that entails, Scott, with The Crimes of Grindelwald.
Yes, now I wouldn't blame you if you'd forgotten how Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them ended a couple of years back, but it shockingly revealed that evil wizard Grindelwald, played by Johnny Depp, had been at large in Colin Farrell's body before being arrested to disinterested shrugs of all involved.
Also, the other bit of the way it ended was they pressed a massive reset button, largely undercutting the entire film.
Yes. The Crimes of Grindelwald wastes no time in breaking Grindelwald out of Chucky, releasing him to the pre-World War II world to do, well, not all that much, as it turns out.
It's not just me that thought that. Thank you, that's good.
He's fled to Paris and sets about attracting a cadre of like-minded wizard supremacists, couching their language in concerns for the non-magical folks' increasing capacity for self-destruction, but behind closed doors seeking dominion. Who should face up to this threat? Jude Law's Dumbledore? Probably, but he can't, for reasons of no interest to all but the Potter lore obsessives. The appropriate authorities? Probably, but they can't because mumble, look over there, a shiny thing. A magical zookeeper? Yes! Fetch Eddie Redmayne's Newt Scooby-Dooby. The flimsiness of the rationale for dispatching him to Paris is rivalled only by the reasons for having Alison Sudol's Queenie Goldstein and Dan Fogler's Jacob Kowalski showing back up, and if you think those were flimsy, just wait until you get to the reasons that they break apart, or indeed to the introduction of Voldemort's snake, who is a Korean lady here. Please, don't ask. My main issue with the first Fantastic Beasts film was that the story was barely more than a fag packet sketch that could be summed up as Grindelwald exists. My main issue with this outing is that exactly the same summation applies, and it's very hard to see this as anything other than a lazy cash-in, or at the most forgiving possible look at it, a gratingly drawn-out version of what should have been the first act in whatever the next film winds up being, assuming that one has a plot worth discussing. Now, it's not fair to say that it's entirely a repeat of the last film. Rowling's taken some inspiration from the Star Wars Disneyverse by stuffing in pointless references to past works to gain some fuzzy nostalgic feels. Do you remember Nicholas Flamel? Have you craved an on-screen presence for him? Well, your long nightmare is finally over, you lone weirdo, but I can't imagine anyone else caring in the slightest. I most certainly
forced.
As for the rest of it, well, it's a thing that was in front of my eyeballs for somewhere north of 2 hours, at least half an hour too long, that's put together well enough mechanically that it wasn't actually a dull experience. David Yates and co have been at the wizarding grindstone often enough to know how this sort of thing goes with decent enough CG and all that jazz, and the actors, even the allegedly Me Too-y ones like Johnny Depp, do what's asked of them well enough. They're let down by a script from Rowling that's, well, barely present, with characters so unmemorable that I had an argument on the way out of the cinema with my wife on whether Ezra Miller's character was actually in the first film, and he was the entire point of the first film. Which
what's actually played by Ezra Miller though? Because I'm watching that thinking, okay, I remember this character, but I don't remember it being him.
It is. He must have had a haircut or something. But yeah, so it just undermines the unmemorability of the central premise of that film, which sadly continues into this one. It's all gathering clouds with no release of Thunderstorm, and lots of Rowling stomping around saying, I am making a clever allegory without actually having anything happen. Again, all text, no subtext. I know authors that use subtext. They're all cowards. I'm going to get one for that one.
3 pertinent reasons why I will never watch this film, right? A, I saw the trailer for it. Well, casting aside the fact I haven't seen the first one, I saw the trailer, and Eddie Redmayne's default mannerisms and dialogue delivery make my skin crawl.
See that kind of slight tilt of his head all the time? I just want to punch him.
And the sort of like ineffectual. Secondly, I have no reason to doubt Amber Heard, and I think we all know what Johnny Depp's crimes are. And thirdly, I can't be doing with this bollocks.
All fair comment. I would disagree slightly. I think Eddie Redmayne's Doctor Who knockoff is by himself all right, because I find Redmayne quite a likeable actor. But yeah, he's bumbling around in situations of such grave import that it's just this weird, unsatisfying clash. It's a series that seems like it should be a mild-mannered, socially awkward guy having wacky adventures with far-fetched magical animals, and it's been hammered into the shape of an anti-fascist Rise of the Nazis analogy that's just forced to the point of shattering.
Yeah, he should be a magical Dr. Dolittle.
Yeah. It's just
and nothing more.
It's a bad idea. It's really poorly observed.
He should occasionally express disdain at the topping on his crumpet.
Yes.
It's this you mentioned about the Star Wars thing, so that's a good analogy, because I mean I've I always thought, much as there have been bits of Harry Potter things that I've enjoyed, I always thought the world never made sense. It always felt too small. Like, you know, there's like one school in the whole country. Mm-hmm. And, well, that means everybody that's there works in the government, because the number of people that apparently work in the government. So, it's... So,
as you know, Drew, every Tory in the land will agree with you. There is only one school. The logistics never made sense. So the world always felt small, kind of literally small. Not, but then, yeah, she's very much, with her screenplay, gone down the Star Wars route of making the universe seem small because everybody's bumping into everybody else who knows anybody.
Yeah.
And I hate that. I really hate that.
That sort of thing also just feels to me like a really cheap attempt at layering on, not necessarily depth, but a sense that this was all intended to be a single world, and it was all conceived at the same time, as opposed to
it was always going to be a trilogy.
Yes, I don't need to write any more of these books. Oh, I remembered I quite like money.
Yes, yeah. So the first film was a pretty flimsy thing, but and I've also I'm realising there's another Star Wars kind of connection there. It feels like it too, because Ezra Miller's character and the importance it's given to him does feel a bit kind of Anakin Skywalker, midi-chlorian-y Verdance in the Force nonsense. That, and the acting quality is about as good between Ezra Miller and Jake Lloyd, so there's that. Because Ezra Miller's awful. Like, really awful. And we need to talk about Kevin. Must have been the one time he's ever acted, because everything else I've seen him in, he's appalling. But yeah, it's you're talking. It's so very clearly backfilling on what has been established before. It's like, well, Dumbledore can't go to fight him. Why? Well, because in the first book she wrote, she said that Dumbledore didn't fight until 1947, so they've got a time, so they need to go, why can't he fight him now? Quick, look over there.
Yeah.
You know, it's kind of written herself into a corner there, and it's desperately trying to... God, it is so like Star Wars, because that was exactly the same problem with the prequels.
I just wish people would stop calling J.K. Rowling a master storyteller. She's clearly not. If J.K. Rowling were a master storyteller, what she would do as a spin-off is she would take one of the sort of one of the Muggle families and write a compelling kitchen sink drama about them with no magic in it whatsoever. That's what a master storyteller would be able to do. Oh, look over there, something flashing coming out of a wand.
Yeah. Of course, she tried that as what a pen name she used in the book wasn't really doing very well, so it was leaked to the press that was it Sam Goldthwait or something
Robert
like that?
Galbraith.
Galbraith, yeah.
Oh,
Robert
actually, J.K. Rowling. All of a sudden, it was successful overnight. Not sure how that happened, but
curiously, not critically successful.
I mean, like for all bagging on the
She's
film,
also an arsehole, so
yeah. But for all my quibbles with this film, it's not actually bad. It's just aggressively mediocre,
that's a good way to put it.
I just don't see the point for anyone outside of a hardcore Potter obsessive. This is not building a fan base of new fans to it. It's purely fan service for the people that are already there.
I mean, there are some bits that I like, and I mean, as much as I'm kind of fed up of everything being CGI, because there's still, for most films, it still looks not real. And there's that horrible CGI that everything CGI seems to have, and I can always tell.
Who is the market for these films? Because my wife is as Harry Potter as they come, to the point where she's got several signed first editions, which I really want her to sell now. And even she has expressed little to no interest in any of these movies.
I don't have the answer to that, other than maybe it's a pitch for the people that grew up with Harry Potter are now probably old enough to have their own families now, and perhaps that's who she's hoping will be brought in as, oh, hey kids, why don't you go and see this new film that's based on the stuff we used to read.
It makes sense, because the first book was released in 1997, so yeah, it's 21 years, so absolutely could have their own families now. It's and you know, it's the fact that Warner Brothers just want to make more money, obviously.
Yes,
obviously.
And they want to be the next Disney, but...
No, so it's a good excuse for a cinematic universe, and I'm sure they just backed up a dump truck full of money to Rowling's house and said, here, have at it. And
because what she needs is more money.
Yes.
Yeah, but listen, there's still some quite good effects work, and there were some nice things, like the kind of Chinese dragon kind of creature. Yeah. I was doing a kind of Puss in Boots, some Shrek effect on his eyes, and it's there were some nice bits like that, and there were nice moments, but as the whole thing's just kind of meh. And I'm glad you said too, Scott, earlier about like up until the end when he starts becoming it becomes Nuremberg rally like. What are the crimes of Grindelwald supposed to be? Apart from the fact, he's barely in the film.
Yeah.
The crimes of Grindelwald, which Grindelwald more or less isn't in, and he doesn't do any crimes up until sort of at the end. And like, it's okay.
Well,
I don't really see what's the
maybe
point of this. Okay.
Maybe he decided he couldn't do the time.
Don't give away the title to the next one.
Yeah.
Oh dear.
But I mean, of course, the most pressing question raised in this film is exactly what point did Dumbledore switch over from sharp three-piece suits to fabulously bejeweled bathrobes as acceptable daywear? Because it's a very different change in outfit between this and the previous films.
That's a good point. It's because in the other films, he's very much sort of your typical wizard with the whole wizarding robes and things, and this is just businessman.
Yes. Well, times change. Fashion changes.
It's like when you would be used to seeing George Michael sort of absolutely immaculately presented, and then in the tabloid press he would just be bombing about in a 3-stripe Adidas tracksuit, albeit black and gold.
So Dumbledore was in Wham. Is that what we're saying?
Makes as much sense as anything else.
Yeah, in the cinematic universe of Harry Potter and all that jazz, why not?
And Grindelwald's Andrew Ridgeley, and that's why they split up.
The most ambitious crossover project in cinematic history.
Oh no. What is this rabbit hole? Right. I refuse to go down it.